Welcome to Identiverse 2025. We're here recording live from the Cyberist TV studio on the expo floor at the Mandalay Bay Conference Center in Las Vegas. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me for this interview is Amir Ofek, CEO at AxoniusX. Welcome, Amir.
Thank you, Adrian.
So I'm betting a lot of people have heard of Axonius, but a lot of people like me haven't heard of AxoniusX. So let's start there.
Sure.
What is AxoniusX? And the relationship.
Yeah, so AxoniusX was founded 4 years ago as the innovation team, innovation unit within Axonius. We're like a startup within a startup mode. And our charter is really to build new products, new offering that go and expand the Axonius offering, the Axonius platform. And that's what we've been doing for the last 4 years.
And so are you exclusively focusing on identity, or is that just one of many things that you're working on?
So we constantly have other ideas, popping up in our head. We started our first actually product that we launched was around SaaS management.
Okay.
And managing
SSPM?
SaaS, SSPM, exactly, managing SaaS applications. And that kind of brought us to the understanding that a lot of IAM folks that were tasked with SaaS management actually need also solutions around identity management. And that's when we started kind of focusing on identity management. Currently, that's our prime focus. We launched the product just at the beginning of this year, and we're now focusing on it.
Yeah. Before I went independent, became a consultant, the last vendor I worked for was SSPM.
Oh,
so
nice.
I was aware of that. I was aware that you guys were stepping into that
I see a
space.
lot of synergies between those two domains,
And it's very true. Like when I worked for that company, what we did in identity was very basic. It was, is MFA enabled? Is it enforced? Didn't go very deep, didn't go into access control or RBAC or anything like that. So, and it's with posture management in general, it's interesting how often you just come back to identity.
Correct.
Again and again. It's the thing that ties
all together.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got the statement, actionability meets identity. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we are now in Axonius starting something that we call the actionability era. We believe that it's very nice to collect a lot of data and to analyze it, but if you don't drive it to action at the end of the day, it's a bit meaningless. So that's kind of what we are now applying across all of our platform. Now, at the very fundamental of it, Axonius is a data product or a data platform.
Right.
We collect data
lots
from
of integrations.
Lots of sources, etc. And we started by kind of driving the truth of that data, like becoming a single source of truth for the organization. But just leaving it there is not enough. So we said, let's drive this truth to action. Let's actually try building workflows. Let's try and kind of build the remediation, the recommendation for what you do with what we unravel. And it's very relevant when it comes to identity. So when it comes to identity, it's very important to create visibility of all identities within the company, observability of them, so you can recommend what type of analysis to draw from that, etc. But if you don't drive it to action at the end of the day, manage the identity lifecycle, managing risk, managing posture, as you mentioned, then it's a bit kind of only halfway through.
Yeah, so it makes me think of vulnerability management in a way that a lot of the extra context you need in vulnerability management, the asset owner has that.
Correct.
Not the vulnerability analyst.
Correct.
And also the remediation piece, the asset owner does that, not the analyst. So how much of a challenge is that when you're talking about actionability? Your product, I imagine, is not being used by the asset owner in this case. Is that a challenge?
Well, not necessarily. It's not being used by the asset owner. I would say IAM teams at the end of the day. Well, you could call them the kind of the asset owner or not. But IAM teams at the end of the day, they need to manage the entire identity, whether it is for security reasons, whether it is for operational reasons, and you need to drive action of managing those identities. You need to make sure that you govern and provide all of the permissions in the right manner, that you entitle the employees joining the companies, leaving the company, you entitle all of the service accounts, the non-human accounts, and so on. So yeah, they're not like the asset owner, let's say, of a service account, but they should see themselves as the one responsible that every service account has an owner, that every service account has the right permissions, and definitely when it comes to human identities around the company.
So the IAM team is the ICP for this product?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So the
I
IAM
made a bad
team,
assumption.
yeah. So the IAM team, from our perspective, is the one to own the Axonius Identities product. The IAM team can sit in the IT side of the business or in the security side of the business. And what we see very, very often is the need to bridge between the two. So I think the best companies that really prevail and solve the identity security aspect and the identity operational one are the ones that really know how to collaborate between security and IT, bring it all together. If you don't bridge and you act in silos, it's always a bit broken at the end of the day.
Yeah. And is this product complementary with other IGA solutions, or is it intended to be a replacement?
Well, it can be both, I would say. So first, when we came to the identity space, as I mentioned, we evolved through kind of the SaaS world. So what IAM folks told us is that you do very well this aggregation of data and in a very profound way because you have a single data model that brings it all together.
Yeah.
So that's a very required now aspect when it comes to identity. Identities today act in silos and you really want to bring them all together. So the first thing that we do is even not IGA. It's what today the industry called ISPM, Identity Security Posture Management.
Okay.
Basically creating all of the visibility and observability of all of the identities that lie out there, whether they're on the cloud, SaaS, on-prem, servers, you name it. So that's the first thing. Second thing is really bringing the IGA component in terms of driving the whole kind of governance, lifecycle management, and so on. And the third element is those new kind of trends right now that are called NHI and ITDR, which from my perspective are just components of building a comprehensive identity product. So we cover all of that. So it's not just IGA by the kind of, I would say, traditional way of looking at IGA. It's a bit more kind of comprehensive from all of those new capabilities.
Yeah, and just mentioning all those things, the detection and response piece, the non-human identities piece, a lot of that, to me, that sounds like, okay, we need another connector, we need another integration to pull in that data because that data lives in different places, but it's connected as well. For the detection and response, maybe that's one of your posture management findings is logs are not enabled for this.
Exactly.
Or they're not enabled, they're not rich enough or detailed enough.
Exactly. So that's exactly the strength of us.
Especially in Microsoft.
Microsoft.
Always happens in Microsoft.
Always happens in those large, I would say, multiple layer type of platforms.
Yeah.
So that's the strength of Axonius. So Axonius over the years, we are 8 years, have been exactly in that business of building and putting together integrations from various sources under a single data model. We have a very strong correlation engine. We have very strong normalization, deduplication, cleansing of all of that data. Today we have over 1,200 such integrations. We call them adapters. And this adapter factory that we build is exactly playing a very strong part when it comes to identities.
So you don't need to rebuild that. You get to just sit on top of what Axonius is. Oh,
exactly.
That's amazing.
The whole concept of Axonius really is we have now evolved into a true platform.
Yeah.
So we have those back-end engines like the adapter factory, like our correlation engine, like our workflow engine, and additional aspects that are cutting across all of our products, whether they're on the asset management side of things, whether they're on SaaS management side of things, and whether they're now in the identity management side of things.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is an interesting question about tying identity governance to cyber asset observability. I mean, clearly, if you don't know, you have the asset, right?
Exactly. What you don't see, what you don't know, you cannot really manage. It's true for cyber assets. It's true for vulnerability management and exposures, and it's definitely true for identities. If you don't know all of the identities in the company, who is accessing them, through where they're accessing them, whether an identity is being accessed through a specific server, through a specific endpoint, through a specific cloud workload, then it's very hard to understand the context of that identity. And I think that's, again, the unique perspective that we bring now to the IGA space of bringing additional context layer. of bringing this context of the identity doesn't live by its own, in a silo.
Yeah.
This identity either you need to bring the context of where it was reached from, where the permission was granted through, which other identities are actually interacting with that server, with that workload, and so on and so on. And that's kind of the unique perspective that we can bring with Axonius.
I imagine you can discover some gaps there as well. Like I'm thinking, okay, like maybe this is a non-corporate device. It's not corporate managed, so there's no agents on it.
Right.
But I know the asset exists because it showed up on a network scan, and then I see a login event coming from it. So I can derive from that what type of device it is, who's using it.
Exactly.
Whether it's a laptop or a server or.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So specifically, when you look at the ITDR use cases, for example, it's not a coincidence. It's called detection and response.
Yeah.
And the detection part is really important to bring the context. So it's not just monitoring the behavior of the identity, it's really to understand, like you said, which device this identity was tracked in. Where was it logging in? Where was it logging in during the time of the day, during location, during IP address, and so on. And then you build the remediation or the response based on that context. It's not just spitting out logs into a SIEM or of sort and hoping that somebody will know what to do with them.
So where are you seeing a lot of success, like early success stories with this? Where are people, kind of having that light bulb moment, where they're like, okay, like I understand why this needs to be a thing.
Yeah, so I'll give you maybe a few examples without naming specific companies. So one of our early customers is actually a very large conglomerate of manufacturing.
Okay.
So imagine like 8 opcos all under one kind of holding company. And what they needed is really an ability to create one centralized view of all of your identities within the entire kind of global operation that they have.
As an incident responder in my past, I've wanted that for so long.
Exactly. Yeah. So their main issue was that currently it was very bespoke, very siloed. They couldn't tell what the specific opco was defining as an identity versus another one, and they couldn't create that kind of full view. And with Axonius, that was something they got quite quickly. So by the fact we could integrate to all of their PAM solutions, to all of their IDP solutions, to all of their ADs that are lying around the world, in various locations, in various contexts, we could pull all of that data, normalize it, and create for them one single repository, which was like by itself already a big win for them, for all of their capabilities. But we didn't stop there. We then took that and actually implemented their full IGA across the operation. We're now kind of in the process of deploying it, of creating a common IGA workflows, common IGA rules across the company that they can actually manage in a very concise way. So that was one use case. Another common use case that we see is what we see in terms of PAM enhancement. So we have one of our customers is a large pool manufacturing company in Europe.
Like swimming pool.
Like swimming pools, yeah. And they have, again, operations globally, etc. They deploy their PAM, but they saw that their PAM is becoming a bit kind of not up to date, let's call it, because some of the privileged identities that started kind of coming up in the organization were not updated on a regular basis to their PAM solution. So the ability to constantly monitor what are the new privilege administrators or privileged identities that need to be entered into the PAM, it was a very, very kind of immediate use case. The other one was to clean the data or to provide more hygiene to their existing PAM deployment. So there were a lot of privileged identities there that were no longer existing or were no longer privileged, that had to be cleansed up from their PAM solution. So this kind of PAM enhancement or PAM hygiene, so to speak, is something that we see very, very common.
Yeah, so your first example is really interesting because I feel like that's kind of the holy grail, like pulling the identity together in all those places. Because, I think back in 2007 we saw a future where everything went through SSO.
Correct.
Never happened, right?
Yes.
So you'll have somebody who is first letter, last name, maiden name in this system. But then they got married, never got changed in this system.
Correct.
Got changed in this system. which is first letter, middle initial, first 5 digit letters of last name, and you have to match all that up somehow.
Exactly. So
how do you do that?
that's kind of what we do for a living. Okay. Yeah. What we do for a living is first understanding the source of information. So we go very deep into understanding the granular information, the granular permission, sometimes up to the resource level, like a GitHub repo. Who has a permission to, who doesn't, what level this repo has. So we don't stop just at the access level. We really understand the source of the data. And then we build very strong correlation engines that know how to, for example, correlate between a name that is parsed in one way and parsed in a different way in another
so some
place.
Of that can be automated now.
Absolutely. A lot of it is automated, not some. That's kind of, we drive to a kind of a nirvana where everything, all of the correlation will be actually automated. And once you have that, you can actually apply very nice machine learning and AI on top of it, because then you run on a very clean and concise data. And machine learning can be much more impactful, of course, when there is no noise and no garbage that it needs to clean constantly.
Yeah. Amir, thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. I love it. In just 15 minutes, I learned a lot, and always happy when I get to learn something in these conversations.
Thank you.
Yeah. To find out more about AxoniusX, please visit securityweekly.com/AxoniusIDV. And for all Identiverse 2025 coverage, you can also visit securityweekly.com/IDV. And thanks again, Amir.
Thank you.